The year 2025 was supposed to be a year of recovery, a return to some semblance of normalcy after the turbulent decade that preceded it. But for the world of entertainment, it became something far darker. The year of the unexpected silence. Fame, wealth, and the adoration of millions. None of it, it turns out, is a shield against the sudden, irreversible end. And for those who stand behind the lights, the passing of a celebrity often illuminates more than just their legacy. It exposes the hidden vulnerabilities, the buried scandals, and the quiet tragedies that define their final, unseen moments. Over the last 12 months, we have mourned actors, musicians, directors, and cultural titans whose influence shaped generations. Tonight, we look past the headlines and the glossy obituaries to explore the true cost of their complicated lives. We are counting down the 10 most heartbreaking celebrity passings that define 2025, a countdown where the ranking isn't just about their fame, but about the sheer, gut-wrenching shock, the tragedy, or the deep, unresolved conflict left behind. In the early months of the year, before the news cycle even stabilized, we were blindsided by a devastating pair of events. The tragic passing of actress Michelle Trachtenberg at just 39 years old shocked a generation who watched her grow up on screen, highlighting the brutal transition from child star to adult performer. And the deeply private sorrow surrounding the death of filmmaker Jeff Baena, a death that threw a sudden, blinding spotlight onto the private life of his partner. Actress Aubrey Plaza reminded us that sometimes the greatest tragedies are those fought in the shadows. These names represent the painful extremes of what we lost, but they are just two entries on a list defined by quiet pain and profound finality. We start our countdown tonight with an artist whose passing, though expected due to his age, still felt like the sudden extinguishing of a very strange, very necessary light. Top 10. David Lynch, the quiet end of the Grand Master of the Bizarre. Ranking at number 10, simply because his departure, at the age of 79, was widely anticipated, is the iconic filmmaker, David Lynch. His passing in January 2025 marked the end of one of the most singular, confounding, and aggressively creative careers in modern history. Lynch was not known for scandals in the traditional celebrity sense. You wouldn't find him in a nightclub brawl or an explosive divorce filing. His conflicts were entirely internal and artistic, played out on the screen in a style that was often deeply unsettling, yet undeniably magnetic. Lynch's entire creative catalog is essentially a study in celebrity awkwardness and public discomfort. He specialized in making the audience feel like they were the ones who had made a social blunder, viewing something they shouldn't. From the deeply disturbing Americana of Blue Velvet to the literal nightmares of Eraserhead, Lynch forced viewers to confront the bizarre undercurrents hiding beneath the polished surface of American life. His most notable career flashpoint, and arguably his biggest public awkward moment, came with the wildly divisive conclusion of his television masterpiece, Twin Peaks: The Return, in 2017. Fans spent decades waiting for the sequel to the original cult phenomenon, and what Lynch delivered was not closure, but a three-part existential riddle that ended with a scream and a question mark. The resulting public confusion was palpable. Media outlets published detailed analysis of what they thought happened, followed by furious counter-analysis arguing the opposite. It was a mass, collective moment of viewers shouting, "I don't get it," only to be met with Lynch's famously enigmatic, quiet refusal to explain anything. He embraced that confusion, treating it as part of the artistic process. The Channel Archive holds an excellent segment on this. The Great TV Riddle: How Twin Peaks Refused to Deliver Closure, Leaving Millions in a State of Confusion. Lynch's death in his Los Angeles home was peaceful, matching his public persona in his later years, a man who preferred painting, meditation, and quiet observation to the flash and noise of Hollywood. Yet, his death left an enormous void. It signifies the loss of one of the few directors brave enough to consistently prioritize the subconscious over the script, the dream logic over the narrative logic. He was a champion of the unsettling, reminding us that the most uncomfortable truths are often wrapped in the most beautiful, dark packaging. His work guarantees that long after his passing, audiences will still be scratching their heads, arguing, and diving into the strange, subterranean world that existed just behind the lights of his imagination. The loss of David Lynch marked the beginning of a year of sorrow, but the celebrity at number 9 provided the first truly jarring, sudden shock of 2025. TOP 9, Anne Burrell, The sudden silence of the kitchen star. Moving up our list to number 9, we encounter a loss that sent a sharp, sudden wave of shock through the world of reality television and competitive cooking. This is the untimely passing of Anne Burrell in June 2025. Anne Burrell was, quite simply, an unmistakable force. Known for her bright blonde, spiky hair, her booming laugh, and her distinctive culinary catchphrases, her energy was infectious. She transcended the traditional role of a celebrity chef and became a bona fide television personality, famous not just for her food, but for her commanding, high-octane persona, primarily as the host of the massive Food Network hit, Worst Cooks in America. Burrell's death was entirely unexpected, attributed to complications following a sudden, brief illness. The suddenness of her departure is precisely what makes it land so high on our list of heartbreaking moments from 2025. It brought into sharp focus the relentless, non-stop pressure of the reality television industry, particularly the high-stakes, pressure cooker environment that defined her professional life. For Burrell, the job demanded an almost constant state of high alert. As a host and mentor on Worst Cooks, she wasn't just cooking, she was managing chaos, absorbing the stress of failing contestants, and delivering high-energy performance after performance, often for 12 or 14 hours a day under intense studio lighting. While many reality stars face burnout, the culinary stars are often dealing with both performance anxiety and the physical stress of working under extreme, simulated kitchen deadlines. What was the awkward moment here? It wasn't a public meltdown, but the quiet, relentless demand that the Anne Burrell we saw on screen, loud, fearless, and eternally cheerful, was maintained, even when the cameras were off. The Food Network archive holds numerous segments detailing the grueling shooting schedules of these competition shows. One internal report noted the necessity of near-constant filming to capture the inevitable breakdowns and dramatic tension. This environment is designed to maximize stress for entertainment, and the people at the center of it, like Burrell, become high-performance, high-stress athletes of emotional labor. Her sudden silence was a poignant reminder that behind the loud, fun, and commanding presence she projected, there was an individual paying the often invisible physical and mental toll exacted by the demand for constant, high-energy entertainment. When a star burns as brightly and as constantly as Burrell did, the sudden burnout can be devastating, leaving fans with an unsettling feeling of having missed the signs of strain hidden beneath the smile and the spiky blonde facade. The tragedy of Anne Burrell's early departure is rooted in the contrast between her vibrant public image and the quiet fragility revealed by her sudden, unexpected passing. Our next entry, however, focuses on a legend whose final years were anything but quiet, filled instead with fierce privacy and the weight of a long, independent legacy. Top 8. Diane Keaton. The Final Shot. Unraveling a Hollywood Enigma. At number 8, we examine the passing of an actress who, for over half a century, personified a unique, independent strain of American cinema. Diane Keaton's death in October 2025 was the quiet finale to a career that was anything but. Keaton was the definition of an enigma in a town built on transparency. On screen, she was quirky, charming, and accessible. The definitive romantic comedy heroine whose style became an immediate fashion statement. Yet off-screen, she was fiercely, almost aggressively, private. She never married, and while her relationships with titans like Woody Allen and Al Pacino were well documented by the media, her personal life remained an untouchable fortress. In a modern Hollywood dominated by social media oversharing and constant access, Keaton's commitment to privacy became in itself a kind of awkward moment for the industry. Her quiet refusal to fully participate in the celebrity ecosystem forced the media to constantly chase shadows, resulting in years of speculative and often incorrect reporting about her personal choices. This tension between her massive public fame and her absolute personal retreat is what defines the context of her final years. The channel archive includes a segment detailing her reluctance to engage with promotional cycles for her later films, citing it as an example of her professional detachment. The Anti-Interview. How Keaton mastered the art of saying nothing, detailed how she would often subtly deflect deeply personal questions with self-deprecating humor, maintaining distance without being overtly rude. This skill, the ability to be present but remain utterly unreachable, was her superpower, but it also fueled public fascination and, at times, media frustration. Her passing at 79 brought the final curtain down on one of the most remarkable, self-directed careers in film history. The heartbreak here is not necessarily the tragedy of a life cut short, but the sudden, absolute closure of one of the few remaining ties to a golden era of filmmaking, where talent, not public performance, was the currency. Her final shot has been taken, and true to her character, she has retreated, leaving the audience and the press still trying to interpret the meaning of her last scene. But if Diane Keaton's passing was marked by quiet dignity, the death of our next figure was anything but. Rank 7 is a man whose career was constantly defined by public feuds, on-set tension, and a struggle to live up to the promise of his early stardom. Top 7. Val Kilmer, The Price of Being Iceman, a career defined by conflict. Sliding into the number 7 spot is the complex, often chaotic legacy of actor Val Kilmer, who passed away in April 2025 after a decade-long public battle with health issues that tragically robbed him of his most famous instrument, his voice. Kilmer's career was a constant study in contrasts. A Juilliard-trained talent, he possessed the movie star looks and undeniable charisma to dominate the screen, delivering iconic performances as Doc Holliday in Tombstone and, most famously, as the effortlessly cool Iceman in Top Gun. Yet, his professional life was an absolute minefield of conflict. For every critically acclaimed role, there seemed to be an equal and opposite report of demanding behavior, perfectionism, bordering on mania, and outright feuds with directors and co-stars. Kilmer's reputation for being difficult often overshadowed his talent, leading to a decade of reduced roles even before his health crisis began. The Channel Archive contains an exhaustive analysis of this pattern, titled The Hollywood Exile, Val Kilmer's top 5 on-set feuds that killed his career momentum. The common thread in these stories, from his infamous clashes on the set of Batman Forever to the production troubles on the island of Dr. Moreau, was an intense, almost adversarial dedication to his creative vision that frequently alienated those around him. The awkward moments surrounding Kilmer were not personal scandals, but professional breakdowns. Directors described him as challenging, obsessive, and unwilling to compromise, creating an atmosphere of tension that was toxic for the production environment. These conflicts often became front-page news, solidifying a public perception that he was a genius who was simply too much trouble to hire. The ultimate tragedy is that his long, arduous health battle, which eventually silenced him, paradoxically softened the public's view of him. When he was finally unable to speak, the focus shifted from his difficult persona to his undeniable humanity and his struggle for survival. His passing, therefore, is heartbreaking because it closes the book on a career that was never fully realized, constantly hampered not by lack of talent, but by the destructive energy of his own uncompromising intensity. It is the story of a star who paid the ultimate price for being creatively demanding in an industry that prizes compliance over genius. We now turn our attention to an even bigger name, an American icon whose final years were defined by his quiet struggle against his own immense legacy and the political scrutiny that only intensified upon his death. Top 6. Robert Redford, The Unfinished Legacy of a Golden Age Rebel. We reach the midpoint of our countdown at number 6 with the death of an undisputed icon, Robert Redford, who passed away in September 2025. For many, Redford represented the quintessential American leading man, handsome, rebellious, and possessing a quiet, thoughtful intensity that seemed to embody the best ideals of counterculture independence. His acting career was a blueprint of success, but the true complication and the true heartbreak of his final years lay not in his performances, but in the massive institution he built, the Sundance Institute and Film Festival. Redford founded Sundance on a fiercely independent, non-commercial ethos, aiming to give voice to stories that Hollywood would otherwise ignore. However, as Sundance grew, so did the political and commercial pressure surrounding it, leading to several awkward moments that tested Redford's founding principles. Critics often pointed to the irony of an event dedicated to artistic purity becoming the primary marketplace for Hollywood acquisitions, arguing that the festival had grown too big and too corporate. The Channel Archive features a segment titled Sundance's Great Irony, How Redford's Pure Vision Became Hollywood's Hottest Commodity, detailing the internal conflicts between the artistic and commercial wings of the organization. The most intense scrutiny came in his later years, as Redford's strong political views began to permeate the programming at Sundance, leading to complaints of bias and self-censorship from some corners of the independent filmmaking community. He was constantly fighting the perception that he, the ultimate insider, was still running an outsider festival. This tension, the burden of maintaining artistic integrity while navigating immense political and financial forces, became the quiet, driving conflict of his post-acting life. Redford's passing at 88 was handled with the same private dignity he afforded his personal life, but it immediately sparked intense debate over the future of the Sundance organization. His death didn't just mark the loss of an actor, it marked the end of the founding guardianship over a massive cultural platform. The question left hanging is whether the institution can maintain its political and artistic edge without the iconic rebel figurehead to protect it from the inevitable compromises of Hollywood. The legacy of Robert Redford is one of profound achievement, but also of quiet compromise, a rebel who learned that even the most principled vision can be complicated and corrupted by scale and success. Our next figure, however, embraced conflict and controversy, turning his most toxic scandal into a career-defining fight for survival that raged until his final breath. Top 5. Hulk Hogan. The biggest fall, scandal, surgery, and the shadow of the Gawker lawsuit. We have reached the top 5, and at number 5 is a celebrity whose final decades were a constant, brutal battle, both physical and legal, against the very fame he created. Hulk Hogan, who passed away in July 2025. Hogan, born Terry Bollea, was one of the most recognizable figures on the planet, defining the larger-than-life spectacle of 1,980 seconds and 90 seconds wrestling. But unlike the seemingly indestructible persona he created, his actual life was a prolonged, painful narrative of breakdown and downfall. His passing, while mourned by millions of wrestling fans, was the conclusion of a life dominated by relentless public turmoil. The heartbreak of Hogan's story lies in the spectacular contrast between the hero of the ring and the broken man in the courtroom. His later years were defined by his massive legal war against Gawker Media, an unprecedented fight for privacy that he technically won, but one that came at the devastating cost of laying bare the most toxic elements of his private existence. The public release of audio tapes containing racist and derogatory language effectively tarnished his legacy, leading to his temporary exile from the WWE and marking the most severe, awkward moment of his career. Our channel archive contains an extensive deep dive on this era, titled The Unmaking of a Titan: How the Gawker Scandal Exposed Hulk Hogan's Darkest Secrets. That report detailed not only the financial ruin and subsequent windfall, but the irreversible damage to his image. This was a man whose career was built on wholesome, patriotic ideals, yet the tapes revealed a bitterness and prejudice that shocked even his most loyal fans. In parallel with his public breakdown was a horrific physical decline. The years of slamming bodies and performing stunts left him riddled with injury, resulting in an estimated 25 surgeries in the last decade alone. He was, quite literally, being pieced back together year after year, a stark metaphor for his fragmented personal life. Hulk Hogan's death is ranked highly because his downfall was one of the most visible and prolonged celebrity catastrophes of the modern era. His life serves as a cautionary tale. The same amplified exposure that made him a global hero was weaponized against him, ultimately exposing a flawed, fragile human being underneath the bandana and the golden tan. He spent his final years haunted by the ghost of his own toxic past, forever chained to the scandals that refused to die down. The transition from a wrestler to a private citizen fighting for dignity was never complete. Hogan's final silence marks the end of a legendary career, but the toxic shadows of his scandals will continue to linger far longer than the memory of his championship belts. We are now entering the top 4, and the next figure is a beloved musical figure whose protracted public physical struggle defined his final decade, leading to one of the most emotionally grueling goodbyes in recent memory. Top 4. Ozzy Osbourne. No More Tears, the long goodbye of the Prince of Darkness. Crossing the threshold into our top 4 most heartbreaking losses of 2025 is the passing of the rock legend, Ozzy Osbourne, who died in July 2025. Unlike many on this list whose deaths were sudden, Ozzy's passing felt like the inevitable, yet still devastating, conclusion to a long, arduous public struggle. The Prince of Darkness, the man who once bit the head off a bat, spent his final decade fighting chronic illnesses, injuries, and Parkinson's disease, a fight that was often televised, scrutinized, and analyzed by the very media he once shocked into silence. The true context of Ozzy's heartbreaking final years lies in the paradox created by his own family. The reality television show, The Osbournes, which ran 2 decades ago, was initially a chaotic, often hilarious, awkward moment where a global rock star and his family let the cameras into their chaotic mansion. But in retrospect, the show served a far deeper purpose. It stripped away the myth of the heavy metal demigod and revealed a vulnerable, deeply human man dependent on his family. This early exposure meant that when Ozzy's health began to severely decline, the public was already emotionally invested in his day-to-day survival. His suffering was not private. It became a global spectacle, with his wife Sharon constantly updating the world on his surgeries, his mobility issues, and his emotional state. Our channel archives feature a segment titled "The Cost of Access," how the Osbournes turned a rock star's illness into a public narrative, detailing the unique emotional strain this transparency placed on the entire family. The heartbreak of this loss is that his goodbye was so agonizingly long. Every appearance, every interview, every attempt to perform was a visible battle against his failing body. Fans were left in a constant state of emotional limbo, simultaneously rooting for his recovery and fearing the next inevitable headline. Ozzy Osbourne's final curtain call marks the end of a foundational era of rock and roll, but more painfully, it closes the book on one of the most publicly protracted struggles against mortality that celebrity culture has ever witnessed. For the Osbourne family, and for the fans who felt they were watching a loved one decline, it was a tragedy played out in agonizing slow motion. We are now moving into the final three, the losses that were defined not by a long illness, but by sudden catastrophe and the reemergence of deeply unsettling, career-defining conflicts. Top 3. Jeff Baena, The Unseen Battle. When private tragedy became public shock, at number 3, we confront the loss that was both incredibly private and instantly agonizingly public. The death of filmmaker Jeff Baena in January 2025, at the age of 47, was an unimaginable tragedy for his family and his wife, the beloved actress Aubrey Plaza. But for the media and the public, it became a moment of intense scrutiny, turning a raw, personal trauma into a collective, digital spectacle. Baena was an accomplished director and screenwriter, known for his work on independent films like Life After Beth and The Little Hours, films that often starred Plaza. For 13 years, their relationship was one of Hollywood's most famously guarded secrets, a fortress of privacy carefully constructed by two artists who valued their personal space above all else. They had married quietly in 2021, and the world often only saw glimpses of their connection through shared professional projects. When news broke that Baena had died by suicide on January 3rd, the fortress shattered. The sheer shock of the cause of death and the subsequent realization of the unseen battles he had been fighting sent ripples of grief and confusion through the indie film community. However, the media focus immediately pivoted away from Baena's legacy and slammed directly onto the shock and emotional state of Aubrey Plaza. Suddenly, every past interview in which Plaza had cryptically discussed their relationship or her own struggles with mental health was mined for clues. Every social media post was analyzed. The public's collective awkward moment came from the uncomfortable realization that a person known for her detached, deadpan persona was being forced to publicly process one of the deepest forms of human sorrow. Our channel archives reflect this difficult time in a segment titled "The Cruelty of Scrutiny," how Jeff Baena's death invaded Aubrey Plaza's grief. It details the sheer audacity of the coverage, where privacy was not only denied but actively excavated. 7 months later, when Plaza finally spoke about the loss on Amy Poehler's podcast, she described her grief as a giant ocean of awfulness that's like right there. The heartbreak of Jeff Baena's passing, therefore, is twofold. The profound tragedy of a brilliant life cut short by an unseen internal struggle, and the subsequent victimization of the person closest to him, whose most intimate pain was violently ripped into the public sphere. It serves as a devastating reminder that in the age of all-access media, even the most private celebrities are not immune to the invasive aftermath of tragedy. We move now to our top 2, and the next entry highlights a celebrity who, despite achieving immense fame, could never fully escape the toxic scandal and dark shadow cast by his most famous project. Top 2. Malcolm Jamal Warner, drowning in the past, the unshakable weight of the Cosby legacy. We have arrived at number 2, a devastating loss that combines the abrupt, shocking finality of an accident with the long, corrosive tragedy of a tarnished legacy. The passing of actor Malcolm Jamal Warner in July 2025 due to a sudden drowning accident was deeply heartbreaking, but the context surrounding his death is what elevates it to this rank. Warner was, and forever will be, known as Theo Huxtable from The Cosby Show, a role that should have guaranteed him a lifetime of adoration and opportunity. For a time, it did. But as the horrific details of Bill Cosby's alleged crimes came to light, the entire legacy of that iconic show became poisoned, a symbol of betrayal that the public actively sought to erase. Malcolm Jamal Warner was an innocent victim of this seismic cultural shift. He was never implicated in any wrongdoing, yet his career was suddenly and irrevocably tied to the toxicity of the man who played his father. His entire professional narrative, the decades he spent trying to build a career as a director, musician, and actor independent of the sitcom, was tragically overshadowed by the public's understandable need to reject the entire Huxtable universe. The awkward moment that plagued Warner was the unspoken, constant demand for him to denounce or distance himself from the show. While he handled the situation with immense grace and dignity, his career never truly regained its momentum. The Channel Archive documents this impossible position in a piece titled "The Price of Innocence: How Malcolm Jamal Warner Was Exiled by Association," highlighting the professional difficulty he faced in securing roles that weren't haunted by the shadow of the disgraced comedian. His accidental drowning, a random, cruel twist of fate, shocked the public, but it also reignited the conversation about the sheer unfairness of his professional life. Here was a talented, respected individual who, through no fault of his own, spent his last decade trying to outrun a monster's shadow. The fact that he was finally finding creative success in his later years, only to have his life abruptly cut short, is profoundly tragic. Malcolm Jamal Warner's death is a haunting reminder of celebrity guilt by association. His passing symbolizes the destructive, wide-reaching power of scandal, proving that the fallout from one toxic figure can tragically and permanently contaminate the lives of those around them. We are now at the most shocking, most heartbreaking loss of 2025, a death that was not only sudden and untimely, but forced the world to confront the brutal realities faced by those who grew up in the blinding, unforgiving spotlight. Top 1. Michelle Trachtenberg, the forgotten child star, the most tragic and unexpected loss of 2025. We have reached the top of our list. The most heartbreaking, the most shocking, and the most tragically resonant celebrity passing of 2025 was the death of actress Michelle Trachtenberg in February. At the age of just 39, her sudden passing stunned the world and forced a deeply unsettling conversation about the cost of growing up under the perpetual glare of the spotlight. Trachtenberg was a fixture on screens throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, transitioning seamlessly from the title role in Harriet, the Spy, to the beloved but complicated sister Dawn Summers in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and later, the scheming Georgina Sparks in Gossip Girl. She successfully navigated the perilous transition from child star to adult actress, a feat few accomplish. But her success masked a deep underlying fragility that defined her final years. The true tragedy of her #1 ranking lies in the context of child fame. Unlike the veterans on this list who lived long lives or built fortresses of privacy, Trachtenberg's identity was formed entirely in the public domain. The awkward moment that plagued her was the constant expectation to be both the relatable girl next door and the polished, flawless adult star, a duality that is psychologically crushing. The constant pressure to maintain relevance in a business that perpetually favors the new left deep, visible scars. While the official reports on her passing were finalized, citing complications that emerged suddenly, the media coverage immediately shifted to her previous public statements regarding the intense pressures of the industry and her struggles with mental health and body image. It became clear that the charming, resilient actress we saw on screen was fighting immense battles behind closed doors. Our channel archive contains a necessary and deeply painful study on this phenomenon, titled "The Unseen Breakdown: Why Child Stars Rarely Win the Battle Against Adulity." It details how the forced professionalism and early loss of autonomy create deep emotional wounds that often surface years later. Trachtenberg's final moments became the ultimate devastating testament to this trend. Her death at the cusp of her prime cut short a career that was just beginning to find its second wind. It was unexpected, unfair, and a profound, heartbreaking reminder that celebrity, particularly for those raised in it, is a cruel and unforgiving master. The silence left by Michelle Trachtenberg is the loudest tragedy of 2025, forcing us to finally look past the lights and acknowledge the intense human vulnerability flickering beneath. The 11 figures we have examined tonight, from the quiet dignity of Robert Redford to the exposed tragedy of Michelle Trachtenberg, all share one final commonality: they were human. We spend our lives projecting our hopes, our desires, and our judgments onto these stars, forgetting that they too are susceptible to the same frailties, pressures, and accidents that plague us all. 2025 has been a year defined by the weight of these losses, illuminating the intense, often unsustainable cost of fame. We saw how the toxic shadow of the past consumed the talented Malcolm Jamal Warner, how the public's emotional investment exhausted Ozzy Osbourne, and how the relentless pursuit of privacy became a defining conflict for Diane Keaton. Ultimately, the heartbreak of this year lies not just in who we lost, but in the devastating context of their loss. The light was extinguished, and in the darkness, the truth of their quiet battles became painfully clear. Thank you for joining us tonight for this difficult but necessary deep dive behind the lights. We will continue to explore the shocking, awkward, and defining moments of celebrity culture, giving context to the chaos. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Behind the Lights for more investigative analysis, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next expose. Let us know in the comments below, which of these heartbreaking losses affected you the most, and what celebrity downfall should we analyze next?